in Meretz Hashem on Kuf Mem. So we'll say, so we're starting 3 lines down from the top. So remember again, we're discussing the idea that the new parak, the Mishnah introduced us to the concept that where there are limited assets, I should say differently, the Mishnah taught us that one is what's called the Chasim Merubin, that when there is a lot of inheritance property, and again, we defined what that means yesterday. So then the sons get the inheritance, the daughters get support. When there's nechasim muatim, a more limited amount of funds, a more limited amount of assets, then again, in that case, the daughters are supported and the sons do not receive inheritance. We defined in yesterday's daf the definition of mu'atin and merubin. Again, essentially, it seems to be the consensus opinion was that if there's enough estate assets to support the children until they go ahead and they reach the age of bagrus, until they reach the age of adulthood, that's called nechasim merubin, in which case there'd be a certain amount allocated for the daughters' mizonos, and the rest of that amount, the rest of the estate would be allocated towards the son's inheritance. Says the Gemara, Kuf Mem, 3 lines down, Pshita, merubim and esmatin. This is actually, we're going to get into a very interesting variation of cases, which is what happens when the value of the estate fluctuates. So it says the Gemara, Pshita, merubin. If let's say at the time that the father died, there was nechasim merubin. In other words, the estate satisfied the definitional criteria of nechasim merubin. In which case, again, sons would get inheritance, daughters would go ahead and receive support. And then what happens? Vinismatu. And then the value of the estate diminished. Now, if you look at the Rashbam, thank you. The Rashbam says the following: Pshita. If you look, it's a second short line of the Rashbam. Pshita merubim and esmatu b'shas misa hayu merubim. So at the time that the father died, nechasim merubim, a lot of property. Va'achshav hokiru mizonos onis kaklu hanechasim. I will say there one of 2 ways the Rashbam says. So either again the price of mizonos went up, so that the same amount of money cannot buy the same amount of support. Or the easier way to, I think, to conceptualize this case is niskalkula nechasim, or something happened to some of the estate property. The chasru ve'ein ba'en kedei mazon elu ve'elu ad shiva. So what the Gemara essentially asking is the following: at the time the father died, so the estate qualified as nechasim merubim. Then what happens? The value of the estate diminishes. So what is the status of the estate? Do we say Kavar Zachu Bahan Yarshin? Kavar Zachu, I'm sorry. Shita Merubin Benismatu, I'm sorry. Kavar Zachu Bahan Yarshin. So one says, the Gemara says that's an easy case. In that case, we say that since at the time of the death, so there was Nechasim Merubim, therefore the sons have locked in their inheritance. And even though now the value of the estate goes down, the diminution in that value is felt by the daughters, but the sons ultimately again get their Yerusha, which also effectively means the way that plays out is the daughters will not have mizonos for as long of an amount of time. The idea being that since ultimately again the value of the estate was locked in at the time of death, therefore the sons get the Yerusha, the daughter ends up getting mizonos for less amount of time. What about mu'atim min esrabu mai? We'll say what happens if at the time of the death of the father qualified as nechasim mu'atim, but yet again, then the value goes up. What happens then? Do we say birshus yarshin kaimit? So what the Gemara is essentially asking is the following: what is the status of an estate if at the time of the death of the father, when the father dies, so and it's nechasim mu'atim? So we'll say, how do we view that? Do we view it that since it's nechasim mu'atim, therefore what? Therefore the daughters are considered to be the owners essentially at the time of the death, or do we say no? The sons are still the owners, ultimately, again, until the allocation to the daughters. What's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is this case over here. Nisma'atu, mu'atin v'nisrabu. If at the time of the death of the father, the estate qualified as nechasim mu'atin, and then the estate appreciated mai. So we'll say, so what is the status of the estate property? Do we say on one hand, birshus yarshin kaimi, we still view the estate in the possession of the sons, but rather, again, it becomes the son's obligation to go ahead and dispense the mizonos to their sisters, in which case, since it's considered to be the possessions of the sons, when it depreciates, that appreciation ultimately, again, becomes the property of the sons. Therefore, again, it's considered to be that in the possession of the sons that appreciated. O Dilma, Saluki Misalki Yarshin. I will say maybe the halacha is that in the event that when a father dies, the estate is nechasin mu'atim. Therefore, again, in that case, there's really no Yerusha to be spoken of. Because there's no Yerusha to be spoken of, ultimately, then what? Then the appreciation is considered to be appreciation for, meaning it's appreciation for all of the children, because they'll all get additional support. But the Yarshim do not get a specific share in that appreciation. So Tashma, so we'll say, so on the first case that the Gemara says, of where the estate was nechasim merubin, and then it diminished in value, that's a more obvious case. Because we'll say, since at the time of death, ultimately, again, it was clear that there were Yarshim, so the Yarshim, the inheritors, share in the appreciated value of the estate. The more complicated shaila is when it's nechasim mu'atim, and then it's nisrabu. When the estate qualifies as nechasim mu'atim, and therefore, again, at the time of the death of the father, we assume there's no Yerusha, there's just going to be support for both of the children, but then the estate appreciates. So what do we do with that appreciation? Do we just simply divide it up amongst all of the children as support, or do we say no, that they're still considered to be Yarshim, even though, again, there's not going to be a Yerusha, there's only going to be support, but now that there's appreciation, that appreciation ultimately goes to the Yarshim. That's the Shaila. So Tashma, Dam Rav Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yochanan. So both sides, the Gemara says the following. Now, the Gemara doesn't go ahead and resolve this yet. We're going to try to resolve this from this brisa. Dam Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yochanan. Yisomim shekidmu umachru. So let's listen to this case. Let's say the following situation. You have yisomim, you have orphans who went ahead and sold off estate property pre-division. Now take a look at the Rashba for just a moment. Yisomim shekidmu kodim shemidum banos bedin umachru afilu benuchasim mu'atim. So we'll say, listen to this case. Let's say the following situation. Father went ahead and died, and let's say the estate qualified as nechasim mu'atim. What happens when an estate qualifies as nechasim mu'atim? We'll say, what's the halacha? Nechasim mu'atim, zonos, no Yerusha. Essentially, again, daughters get supported, sons also get support, but ultimately, again, there is no din of Yerusha. Let's say the sons went ahead, and before Beis Din had a chance to allocate the estate as mazonos for the daughters, the sons go ahead and sell off the estate. They sell off some property. What's the halacha? So yisom shekidmu machru benechasim mu'atim, mashemachru machru. We'll say ultimately again, what they sold is sold. What does that show you? That shows you, I will say, that as soon as the father dies, the estate is considered to be the property of the yisomim, of the sons. Now it happens to be that in the case of nechas and mu'atim, so what's going to end up happening is basically when they step in, will allocate or will reallocate that property for support of the daughters. But at the time that the father dies, before Beis Din gets involved with anything, that estate is considered to be the property of the daughters, which will say makes sense. Why? Because what's happening over here in the Mishnah? This Mishnah is a din d'Rabbanan, right? The Chazal are coming along and saying, listen, for the welfare of society, when it's nechasim merubin, when there's a large estate, so fine, sons will get inheritance, daughters will get support. Chazal are saying when it's nechasim mu'atin, we are stepping in and we are reallocating this estate and saying that it goes to the support of the daughters. What the Bryce is saying over here is biblical law is biblical law, which means that when a father dies, I will say what happens? Sons inherit. So meaning that is a de facto rule, and that's irrelevant of nechasim merubim, nechasim mu'atin. Those constructs of nechasim, nechasim mu'atin, those are rabbinic constructs, which fine. But Chazal always have a right to go ahead and dictate monetary law. That's part of Hefker, Beis Din Hefker. They have the right to intervene in monetary law. What the Gemara is saying, however, is that the moment that the father dies, the sons become the Yarshim. Therefore, if you were to have a situation where father dies, and on a technical level, the estate qualifies rabbinically as nechasim mu'atin, but the sons go ahead and sell off estate property, then what's the halacha? What they sold is sold, because that is their biblical right. We'll say, what does that show you? That shows you at the moment the father dies, the sons are the owners of the property. Going all the way back, what else does that teach us? That teaches us that even at the moment the father dies, let's say rabbinically the estate qualifies as nechasim mu'atim. But then what happens? The estate appreciates. They both say, who is the beneficiary of that appreciation? It is the sons, the Yarshim. Because even though, again, we know that this estate ultimately is going to be recategorized as a form of nechasim mu'atim, and therefore it's going to be given to the daughters, nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that the sons are the owners of this particular estate. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, they get the appreciation. So I will say, therefore, again, in both of these cases, case number one, where at the time the father died, so it's nechasim merubin and then it diminished in value, the sons will still get their yerusha because their chilik is established at the time the father died. But even in case number two, where the estate was nechasim mu'atin and then appreciated, the yarshim will have the opportunity to share in that appreciation. Why? Because they are considered to be the owners of the estate. Obviously, right, correct, fine. Says the Gemara, and if you just finish that Rashbam, the Rashbam says over here, Yisum shekidmu kodem shamidum b'nos bedin umachru v'afilu b'nechasim mu'atin ma shemachru machru ve'motzian lamazan ha'isha v'abaras menechasim mishubadim v'kol shekein b'nechasim rubin kitar b'ksubas ha'acham sheshidim motzian laparnasa ve'motzian shmamina kevan shemachru mechirasa mechirasa. So says Rashbam, what do we see from here? Since if the sons went ahead on their own and sold off the property, whatever is sold, here's the operative phrase. Yesh lahen tfisas yad b'nechasim. Let's say you should underline that phrase. Yesh lahem, if it's your Gemara. Yesh lahem tfisas yad b'nechasim. They have a hold. They have a hold in the property. Then nisrabu yesh lahem chelik banus chuzman. So what is amazing? What this is saying is, even in nechasim mu'atin, where we say that the estate goes to the support of the daughters, that doesn't change the fact that what? That the Yershim have tfisas yad. We'll say tfisas yad means they have a hold. They have a hold, which makes sense, because on a biblical level, they are the owners of the estate. So Chazal is saying in the case in the Chasim Mu'atim, we're going to tell you, Yershim, to go ahead and use that property to support the daughters. But it doesn't change the fact that the sons are the owners of the estate. Therefore, any appreciation that occurs ultimately, again, will be the property or will be owned by the Yershim themselves. Incredible. So we'll say the Gemara goes weiter. Yosef Rabbi Yirmiyah Kameit Rabbi Yavo. Boy mine. We'll say, listen to this. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting before Rabbi Yavo, and he asked him, we're going to see there's actually a series of different questions. Al-Manasso, watch this. Al-Manasso, Mahu Shetamait Ben Chasim. This is very interesting. So remember, what have we done so far? We've accomplished a lot, even just between yesterday and today, which is we have now defined that there are different types of estates. Specifically for our purposes, now two types. So nechasim merubin, nechasim mu'atin. If the estate qualifies as a nechasim merubin estate, which I will say is we define as that there is enough property in the estate to support all of the children until they reach the age of adulthood, then in that kind of estate, we'll allocate a certain amount for mazonos of the daughters, and the rest becomes the property of the sons. Nechasim mu'atin, where there's not enough estate property to support the children to the age of adulthood, so we simply allocate the entirety of that estate for the support of the daughters. But now that we've established is that even though it's allocated for the support of the daughters, it is still what? There's still tfisas yad. There's still an ownership by the sons. Now here's the interesting question. In determining whether or not the estate is nechasim mu'atin, do we take into account other obligations that are upon the estate? In other words, when determining whether or not the estate has enough money to support the sons and the daughters until the age of adulthood, do we take on other liabilities or other responsibilities owed by the estate? For example, Amanaso, let's say the man who died also left behind an Amana. Now, what happens to the Almana? What's her entitlement? She is entitled to support from the estate. So now, when determining if there is enough money or enough assets in the estate to support the children, do we back out of the estate amount on the amount of money necessary to support the Almana or not? So, does her claim against the estate diminish the value of the estate? On one hand, so do we say that, look, since she gets mizonos, so therefore we should calculate some amount for her support, back that out of the estate, and then decide how much money is left in the estate, and then make the call whether or not the estate is considered to be nechasim mu'atin. Oh, dilmo, or perhaps we could say, kevan dilu minsava lesla hashtanami lesla. What about do we say the following? And almana only gets mizonos when? Only gets mizonos if she is not remarried. But the moment she remarries, she is no longer entitled to any kind of support from the deceased husband's estate. So do we say that if she gets remarried and she can get remarried tomorrow, right? About she can get remarried tomorrow. But again, leaving aside about say, all the halachas we learned in Ksuvis about Havchana, the idea that a woman can't really get married until after 3 months after, but leaving all of that aside, do we say since she were to get remarried, if she were to get remarried, she would not be entitled to any level of support. Therefore, again, we don't back out her support from the estate. Furthermore, Imtim Salomar, Kevan Dilumin Saba, Lesla, and furthermore, even if we were to say that since if she were to get remarried, she would not be entitled to support. Therefore, what? We do not include, or I should say, we do not back her support out of the estate. Hashta Nami Lesla. Fine. So we'll say, even if we say that for argument's sake, we're not going to about Almana, right? Meaning we're not going to take into account her entitlement to support in terms of determining if the estate is nechasim what. And since at the end of the day, she can get remarried at any time, and once she gets remarried, then what? She is no longer entitled to any kind of support. Bas ishto mahu shetimait ben chasim. What happens to the daughter of his wife? What I was both saying. Remember, we learned this in our Ksuvis days, that a man gets married, and let's say a woman is coming into marriage with children from a previous marriage. So what happens? So now let's say she goes ahead and she brings in a daughter. Husband agrees to support that daughter for some amount of time. Let's say for 5 years, the Rashbam says. So we'll say, do we take that amount of support and back that out of the estate and then determine whether the estate is nechasim or nechasim muatin? So bas ishto mashto ben nechasim miyamrinon kevan dechimin siba nami isla. So we'll say, even if this daughter were to get remarried, she entitled to support from the estate. It's actually very interesting. Once the husband agrees to support that daughter, so she receives that support whether she is single or married. So do we say that since she receives that support no matter what, even if she gets married, we have to back out that amount from the estate before determining whether or not it is nechasim rubim or nechasim muatin? So the Gemara says, "Umimata odilma kevan dilu mesa lesla below mamata." But I will say, can we say on the other hand that what? If that daughter were to die, then what? The estate would obviously not owe her or owe her inheritors, to that matter, any amount of money, and therefore her eschayvus, her liability, does not diminish the estate.
Then the daughters themselves.
I'm sorry.
I mean, the daughters could die. You're talking about supporting. I mean, if the
No. This is talking about not his daughters.
No,
this is talking about her daughter.
So she's entitled to it, even if she.
Remember what we're trying to figure out over here. We're trying to figure out, at the end of the day, we know that we have two frameworks, nechasim muatin. What we're trying to figure out is, how do other obligations or other liabilities against the estate figure into nechasim muatin? This is his children are his children. This is other people who have claims against the estate. Do we back out their claims before determining whether or not it's nechasim muatin?
That reasoning, though, the person could die. I mean, that could be applied, though, even in determining muatin, because if you didn't have daughters, the muatin issue wouldn't even.
Correct. So you see clearly, we don't look at that in terms of his own children, right? In terms of his own children, we assume that they are going to make it to adulthood. That's the automatic assumption. The question is, for external liabilities, essentially what we're asking is the following: do we look at these other claims against the estate as bona fide, solid claims that we know that are going to be there, or do we take into account possible contingencies? That's really the fundamental shayla. So maybe you'll say, where again, since the daughter of his wife, so if she were to die, ultimately again she would not take a claim against the estate. Therefore, maybe we don't view her claim against the estate as something to be backed out of the estate. When determining nechasim and nechasim muatin, then I'll ask you about balchov. What happens if when the man dies, he has a creditor? So mahu sheyimait ben nechasim. So we'll say, let's say the man dies. So we'll say, you hear this shayla. The way we originally defined nechasim merubin and nechasim muatin is just simply vis-a-vis the children. Is there enough property to support the children until adulthood? That's called nechasim merubin. If there's not enough property to support the children until adulthood, that's called nechasim muatin. But how do other external claims against the estate figure into this calculation. Do we subtract those amounts from the estate before determining if there's enough to support the children or not? So Balchov, let's say the father left behind the creditor. He died. There is a claim against the estate. Do we back out the amount of that claim? Do we back out the amount of that debt from the estate before determining whether it's the Chasim and the Chasim Reuben on one hand? Even if the creditor dies, let's say, even if the creditor dies, the estate still owes the heirs of the creditor to pay back that amount. Or do we say, since at the end of the day the debt has not been collected, therefore what? We will not back it out of the estate. So the Gemara says, so it's like others framed this question in the reverse order. They're the same questions, but just reverse the order of everyone. So we'll say in this alternate version, the first question was asked was the following. Let's say a man dies and he leaves behind the creditor. So do we go ahead and back out the amount of the debt from the estate before going ahead and determining if it's nechasim muatin? Amud Beis. So, and we'll say, what happens again if, let's say, the man leaves behind a widow and her daughter, and he agreed to support the daughter for some amount of time? Do we subtract that amount of support from the estate before determining whether or not it's nechasim merubim or nechasim muatin? Mashay ben nechasim almanaso, right? Widow, ma'ushetamai ben nechasim. So again, these were, remember, just so you understand the context over here, these were the series of questions that were posed from Rabbi Yirmiyah to Rabbi Avo. So we'll say the fundamental shaila that Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking Rabbi Avo is what? When there are other existing debts upon the estate, do we subtract those amounts from the net, from the estate, from the guys will call the gross estate, before determining whether or not the estate has nechasim rubim or nechasim muatin or not? So we'll say, so before, what's it, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking the question to Rabbi Avo. So before Rabbi Avo answers the question, there was one more. Yimara, Almanasa ubas, ezo mehen kodemes. We'll say, furthermore, one more question. Let's say again, the man leaves behind an almana and the daughter. Which of them takes precedence? I will say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. We're on Kuf Mem Amud Beis, second line down from the top, and then the Rashbam also second line down. Almanas Sobas ve'im kan ela mazon achos. We'll say, let's say there's only enough mazonos to support one of them. Who gets it? Ushteyan tovos mazonos b'tanai ksuba hilcha kevan ditarvayu b'takanta dirabana achli ezo tikto. So let's say the following case: the almana comes and claims mazonos. The daughter comes and claims mazonos. Who gets the mazonos? So the Gemara says, Amarle. So we'll say, so remember, this is Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Yirmiyah is sitting in front of Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Avo says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, do me a favor. No, go home now. Come back tomorrow. Or let me think about all of these cases. So Kiyasa, when Rabbi Yirmiyah came back the next day, Amarle Pashat Mias Chada. I don't know the answer to all of your questions, but I can at least answer some of your questions. The Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Abasi Asu Amana Eitzel Habas Kebas Eitzel Achim. So I'll say the one question I can't answer, Rabbi Yirmiyah, is the last one you asked me. What was the last question? Is if a man dies and he leaves behind an estate, and there are two women who come to seek support, to seek mizonos, his almana and his daughter. Ultimately, again, and both essentially come with the same level of entitlement. They're both entitled midrabanan to mazonos from the estate. Who gets mazonos from the estate? So Rabbi Avo says, I could at least go ahead and answer one of those questions. Rabbi Abba said in Rabasi, Asu almana eitzel habas kebas eitzel ha'achin b'nechasim mu'atin. I will say an almana to a daughter is like daughters to sons in a case of nechasim mu'atin. in a case of, we'll say, where there is a limited amount of estate property. What does that mean? Ma bas eitzel achin habas nizones va'achin yishul ala psachim. We'll say, just like when we'll say, if you have a case of nechasim muatim, there is a small amount of estate property. Remember again, how do we define nechasim muatim? There's not enough property in the estate ultimately to support the children until adulthood. So what happens then? The daughters get supported from the estate. What happens to the brothers? You shall psachim. Meaning, what that means is let them fend for themselves. Both will fend for themselves. Af almana itzel habas. Both the same halacha is true when two women, the almana, the widow, and the daughter come seeking mizonos, and there's only enough mizonos for one of them. Almana mizones, the almana is supported from the estate. Va'abas tishal ala psachim. And ultimately, again, the daughter of Osai has to go fend for herself. So Osai, so what comes out from this? So let's work backwards. So first of all, again, interesting, and that is halacha l'maisa. Osai. So again, we see a hierarchy. The hierarchy is when there is nechasim mu'atin. I'm sorry. So let's go now with what we know. What we know is the fact. Well, actually, no, let's not go with what we know yet. So Osai. Okay. So here's what we know. When there are nechasim mu'atin, right, a small amount of property in the estate, as defined as there is not enough estate property to support the children until adulthood, so daughters will get support, sons have to just go out and fend for themselves. But what do we see? Lest you think that the sons have fully relinquished their ownership over the property. Is that true? No. Rather, what did the Rashbam tell us? They have what's called tfisas yad. So it's one of these interesting cases where they have technical title over the property, but the daughters really have the full claim to the usage of the property. When I say usage, let's say this is even like liquidation of the assets. Ultimately, again, they are entitled to mazonos. So therefore, again, limited assets, daughters get mazonos, sons get nothing, but yet they still have tfisas yad, which means, as we saw before, that if they were to go ahead and sell off that property, what would happen to Bosai? Would the daughters have the ability to extract from the purchasers? The answer is no. However, again, if there are nechasim muatim, and there is now a claim between an almana and the daughter, the widow and the daughter, so we'll say who wins? The almana. So the almana by the daughter is like the daughter by the son. And therefore, if there's nechasim muatim, the almana will go ahead and get the property for her support, and the daughters have to go ahead and go out and fend for themselves. They will say, now what do we do about all of these questions that Rabbi Yirmiyah posed Rabbi Avo? So we'll say, halacha l'maaseh pasuk is the following. When determining whether or not an estate is nechasim muatim, we do not take into account all of the debts of the estate. In other words, I will say, when determining whether or not an estate is nechasim muatim, we look at one thing and one thing only, which is the amount of assets in the estate sufficient to support the children until adulthood. If the answer to that is yes, then that's called nechasim merubin, and we do not look at whatever other debts the estate may have. We just look at one simple fact: nechasim merubin. If there's enough to support the kids, that's called nechasim merubin, and therefore, again, sons will get yerusha, daughters will get mizonos. If there's nechasim muatim, there's also says, then what happens to the estate? Okay, so then afterwards, the estate has to figure out how to go out and satisfy the debts. Usually what will end up happening is they'll come from the son's Yerusha, but the debts are dealt with on their own. The calculation of nechasim mu'at and nechasim merubin is done independent of any other existing responsibilities that the estate may have to others. That's ultimately the reconciliation of Rabbi Yirmiyah's and Rabbi Avo. Fine. So let's say one last piece in this puzzle. Admon Omer, so let's remember again, the Mishnah ended off with a very interesting statement. So Admon said, what? Because I'm a man, I have to go ahead and lose out. So as I said, remember again. So that was going. The Mishnah said that if there is nechasim muatim, if the estate has limited assets, therefore what? The sons do not get Yerusha, and the estate property is allocated to the daughter from his own. So Admon says it's discriminatory. Because I'm a man, I should lose out. So I say, so what does that mean? So says the Gemara, my Kamar, Admon, what exactly are you saying? Says the Gemara, Amar Abai Hachi Kamar, Bishvil Shani Zochar, Veroi Ani Lasok B'Torah, Hifsadati. So is Admon saying, because I am a man, and Veroi Ani Lasok B'Torah, and Torah is my occupation, right? Therefore, I should lose out on the estate. Says, what does Torah have to do with this? Amarle Rava. So, Admon, are you saying, Me'ata man da'asik b'Torah hu diyaris, delo asik b'Torah hu man da'asik b'Torah hu diyaris, are you saying that it's only a son, Rabosai, who learns, who is entitled to Yerusha, but a son who does not learn is not entitled to Yerusha? Rabosai, that can't be, because the din of Yerusha is a din that when a father dies and leaves behind sons, then what? Then what? Now, granted, that being said, you remember we learned before about a father's right to disinherit children who have gone off the derech. If a father sees fit to go ahead, and remember we also saw Aloch Lamaisa that Chazal do not condone that type of behavior, even if the son has left the fold. I'll just show you something interesting. Take a look at Tosas, or we'll say the last Tosas on the daf. So Tosas says, well, first look at the Rashbam, I'm sorry. Man da'asik kilomar, mish yesh lo shnei banim, echad osik b'Torah ve'echad ino osik. V'chi avad zchus b'yishrasa b'shil she'ino osik. So say, obviously, we know that if a man has two sons, one who learns, one who doesn't, so there's no such thing as the son who doesn't learn losing his inheritance portion. So the Rashbam points out, so the Tosas points out over here, last Tosas on the page, so we're going to see in tomorrow's daf. By the way, you want to come tomorrow to share. You want to make sure you're here, because you want to make sure you're here early to get into the right headspace for this, because tomorrow is going to be, you thought today is good and yesterday was good and the last 5.5 years have been good. Just wait till tomorrow. I'm telling you. I don't want to, and I'm underselling it, by the way. So look at those. Come on. Mitzvah lazon hasabanos, the kavachomer habanim haoskin ba'oraisa. Now we'll see, by the way, in tomorrow's daf, about a very special concept of supporting children who are learning, right? By the way, this is supporting your own children, right? Supporting children who are learning. The kavachomer habanim haoskin ba'oraisa hainu le'inyan mitzvah. Even though we'll see that there is a special inyan of supporting your children who are learning Torah, we're going to see that is not a din ultimately in what? That is not a din ultimately, again, in an obligation. That's a din of all kol mitzvah, and we'll define this. So we'll say, we'll see tomorrow, Mir Hashem, a bit more about a special, beautiful mitzvah of supporting children who are learning. We're not talking about that, says Tosfos. Right now, we're talking about, again, the straight din of Yerusha. The din of Yerusha, we'll say, is applicable independent of whether or not my child likes Torah, doesn't like Torah. The point is, if a son is a son, is a son. So what does Admon mean? Back to the Gemara. So what Amarav B'shil shani zachar, v'roy v'yaresh b'nechasim merubin, hifsalati b'nechasim mu'atin. So we'll say what Admon's objection is the following. What Admon's objection is like this. If I am a son, and therefore what? Entitled to support, in a case of nechasim merubin, should I lose out in a case of nechasim mu'atin? And the answer is, how do we answer, Admon?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. You're right. Meaning, meaning, is it a logical argument? It's not a logical argument. But instead, what it is, it's a benefit for society argument. In other words, you see this hierarchy. This hierarchy is when there's not enough for everyone, and you're only going to give to someone, you need to figure out ultimately, again, who is the child who needs, or the children who need it most. Therefore, if there's enough for everyone, so good. We'll give it to the sons, we'll give it to the daughters. If there's not enough for everyone, we're going to give it to the daughters and not the sons. Is a little fair. You're right, except if somebody's going to have to go out and figure it out, we'd rather the sons go out and figure it out and not have the daughters have to go out and figure it out. We'll say it's the same way, by the way, that if there's only enough for the daughters or the widow, who gets it? The widow, because we'd rather ultimately, again, the daughters have to go figure it out, then the widow have to go figure it out. So therefore, again, ultimately, we reject Admon's objection, and in a case where there are nechasim mu'atin. So if we bring this all together, here is our framework. If there's nechasim merubin, fine. That there are enough estate assets to what I will say to support the children until adulthood. The sons will get Yerusha, the daughters get support. If there is nechasin mu'atin, then what? As defined. There's not enough estate assets to support the children until adulthood, then what? The entire estate is allocated towards the support of the daughters. The sons have to go figure it out. If it's mamish such nechasim mu'atin that there's not enough to support the almana and support the daughters, then what? Then we give the property to the support of the almana, and the daughters have to go figure it out. Furthermore, again, in the determination of the chasimot and the chasim merubin, we do not take into account any other obligations that may vest upon the estate. Rather, again, we just simply look at, is there enough money to go ahead and support the children? Says the Mishnah. We'll say back here. So we'll say, if let's say a man leaves behind sons and daughters and a tumtum. So again, we're going to spend a little bit of time speaking about the tumtum. So we'll say the tumtum, remember again, is a person again whose gender is not known. It's not known because again, the reproductive organs are covered by some type of membrane that prevent us from knowing is it male or is it female. So says the Gemara. So if father leaves behind sons, daughters, and a tumtum, so I say when it's nechasim merubin, then what? Hazicharim dochin oso eitzal nekevos. So the sons go ahead and say, tumtum, we're going to treat you like a nekeva, and therefore again, you're entitled to support. Not actually, I shouldn't say that. Literally, the sons push the tumtum to the status of an nekeva. We'll see what that means. The status of a daughter. Nechasim watim. If however again there is a limited amount of assets in the estate, a smaller amount, then what? Then hanekevos dochos osa eitzal zacharim. The daughters will say, tumtum, you're a zachar, and therefore again your status is like them. Which will say, so what's happening over here? So meaning, if it's nechasim merubin, so the sons will say to the tumtum, you're a status of an nekeva, i.e. you're not yorish. If there's nechasim mu'atin, then the daughters will say you have the status ultimately of a zachar, and therefore what? You're not entitled to support. Ha'omer, if a man says, if ishti, if a man says, if my wife gives birth to a boy, I hereby give over to that child, to that son, a mana. So if that's the case, yolda zachar yita mana. If ultimately again the wife gives birth to a boy, then what? The boy gets a mana. Nikeva masayim. If a man says, if my wife gives birth to a girl, I hereby convey to her 200 zuz, then what? Yolda masayim 200. Yolda nekeva no tells masayim. So if the wife gives birth to a nekeva, the girl gets 200. Im zachar manem nekeva masayim. Or if a man says, if my wife gives birth to a boy, I hereby convey to mamana, to a girl 200. The yolda zachar unekeva. Now we'll say the Rashbam points out over here, this doesn't mean she gives birth to twins. What this means is she gives birth to a boy or to a girl. So if it's a boy, zachar no tamana, nekeva no teles masayim. If it's a boy, the boy gets 100. If it's a girl, she gets 200. Yolda tumtum. What happens if the wife gives birth to a tumtum? Eno notel. That child takes nothing. That child takes nothing. Now, what's the novelty here? Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is Yalda Tumtum Eno Notel. It's in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines into the wide lines. Yalda Tumtum Eno Notel. Now, because this opinion in the Mishnah, which you're going to ultimately attribute to Rav Shimon Gamliel, holds Deberia Bifne Atzma Chashivle Lo Zachar V'Lo Nekeva. The Bible says we are going to see one of the fierce disputes that we are going to have to deal with is what is the status of a tumtum. So you could say possibility one is that tumtum is suffix zachar, suffix nekeva. Either again possible male, possible female. Possibility two is it's considered to be both male and female depending on the circumstances. And possibility three is it's a category onto itself. It's its own category. Beria bifne atzma. It's considered to be, again, its own distinct category. So the Gemara is saying over here that Lamaisa, where a man made all of these conditions, conveying money to a son or to a daughter, depending on what the wife gives birth, and the wife gives birth to a tumtum, ultimately, again, that child gets nothing. Eno notel. Why? Because that child is not considered to be a boy or a girl. Rather, again, that child is a beria bifne atzmo or bifne atzmo. Imamar. However, if a man said, "Komasha teled ishti yito," the man says, "Whatever my wife gives birth to, ultimately, again, that child should get a mana hareze yito." Ultimately, again, that even if the child is a tumtum, the child will get the money. Then ein sham yoresh ella hu. We'll say, what happens if a man dies and the only child he leaves behind is what? Is a tumtum? Then what's the halacha? Yoresh Esakol. So Rabbi say under that circumstance, the tumtum will inherit everything. And the Rashbam points out over here, Yoresh Esakol, Va'apagav de Beriyahu, and even though the tumtum is its own separate category, Hani Mili Hechadika Banim Labanos, the Dokan also Banam Etzabanos, Banam Etzabanim, Vein Lo Lokipan Velokabas. Shabbos say when there's sons and when there's daughters, so the sons and the daughters have the ability to push the tumtum towards the other. But where the tumtum is the only child, then what? The tumtum inherits everything. It says the Gemara. So the Gemara begins by talking about the following. Remember, the first case in the Mishnah was a man leaves behind sons, daughters, and a tumtum. So what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said the sons could push him towards the daughters could push him towards the sons. Says the Gemara, Dochin also the shakal kibas. So what does that mean? So let's say in a case where let's say there's nechasim merubin, there's a lot of estate property. So remember again, as you said before, there's a lot of estate property. Sons get Yerusha, daughters get Mazonos. So what did the Mishnah say? The sons have the ability to push him towards the daughters. So what does that mean? That they push him towards the daughters and what? And he gets Mazonos like daughters. But Hakatani Sefer, we learned at the end of the Mishnah, Yolda Tumtum Eino Notel. To say ultimately again, we learned at the end of the Mishnah that what? That if let's say that case where a man says that if my wife gives birth, I'm going to go ahead and give, right, my wife gives birth to a son or to a daughter, I'm going to give 100, right, a money. So what did we say? That if the wife gives birth to a tumtum, what does the tumtum get? Nothing. Which indicates that's what Rabbi saying, that a tumtum is neither a son nor a daughter. If that's the case, then why should the tumtum be entitled to get support like a daughter? Abaye, dochino ve'eno. So Abaye says you're right. Rather, what could happen over here is that the sons say you're not a son, therefore you're not Yoresh. They push him to the category of the daughters, but he's unable to collect support like a daughter as well. Rava Amars Rava says no. Dochino so v'yeshlo. Rava says no. We'll say in a case where there's nechasim merubin, so the sons could push him to the status of a daughter, but he does get, or I should say it does, the tumtum does get support like a daughter. The seifa, and Abba said the seifa that says that a tumtum is neither reckoned like a son nor a daughter, asa'im Reb Shimon Gamliel. Abba said the seifa that indicates that what? That a tumtum is a beria bifnei atzma, is considered to be or an entity, a gender unto itself. That reflects the view of Shimon Gamliel. This time, because that's what Shimon Gamliel say. Yol the tumtum va'androgynous. I will say now this actually has nothing to do with human beings, but rather again this is actually a case by Karbanos. Take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says over here. So if you see, it's the Rashbam Divrei Maschil Rava Amar Dochin also. So we'll say if you go 3 lines into that, it says B'Seifa de Kamak Shisle Minei the Chashavle Beria Mishnah, which indicates to us that a tumtum is considered to be a creation unto itself. As son of Shimon Gamliel. I'm reading in the middle of the Rashbam. We'll say 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom of the Rashbam. So as son of Shimon Gamliel. This time Seches Timura. The Parakeitzad Ma'arimin. Keitzad Ma'arimin ala Bachar. So Gemara says Mivarachas Sha'isem Uberes. So we'll say listen to this. If you want to avoid Bachar Kedusha, devolving upon an animal, what can you do? Omer Mashebe Me'eha Shalzu Im Zachar Ola Im Nekeva Shlamim. We'll say, so let's say again, a person doesn't want a particular animal to become a Bachar. Now, actually, the case over here that's really happening is the following. I don't have a problem with the animal being a Bachar, but I happen to have other carbonic responsibilities upon me. Therefore, what? Instead of having one animal that's a Bachar, and having to set aside another animal now as a carbon, I'd like to instead consecrate this animal that would have been the Bachar as a carbon. Okay, if the animal is a Zachar, it should be an Ola. If it's an Akeva, it should be a Shlamim. Fine. So let's skip a little bit. But then androgynous. What happens if the animal gives birth to a tumtum or an androgynous? Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Ein kiddush shachal aleim deberiyahu deino lo zachar v'lo nekeva hilchach lo yachol aleim kiddush shlamim va'ola b'may iman v'lo kiddushas bechar So Rav Shimon Gamliel says, if let's say you have this animal and you decided to consecrate this animal as a korban, if it turns out that the animal is a tumtum or an androgynous, the animal is not hektish. Why not? Why not? Because again, Rav Shimon Gamliel says that tumtum is a beria bifnei atzma. It is simply a gender unto itself, and there cannot become mikudash with karbanos. So Yalda took the androgynous. Back to the Gemara. Shimon Gamliel Lomer. Both say last two lines on the daf. Shimon Gamliel Lomer in kedusha chalaleim. Kedusha cannot devolve upon that animal. They say so. Raises the kasha. Tumtum yoresh keben benizon kibas. But both say here's the problem. We have another brayso that says that what? That a tumtum inherits like a son and is supported with mizonos like a daughter. Now, what does this mean? Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Actually, before we get into that, so the Gemara says, "Yoresh kibem yizon kibas bishlam the Rava." So, according to Rava, this makes sense. How so? Because Rava says Yoresh kibem benechasem muatin. That Rava said ultimately again that the tumtum inherits like a son. In what kind of case? Where there's nechasem muatin. Because also, what happens to a son with nechasem muatin? What happens to a son? He gets nothing. So what it means is the daughters could go ahead and push the tumtum to be like a son of nechasim muatin. Benizon kibas b'nechasim merubin. Or there's a lot of nechasim where Rabbi say what? The sons inherit and the daughters get mizonos. So the sons have the ability to push the tumtum to be like a daughter. Benizon kibas b'nechasim merubin. So we'll say that makes sense according to Rava. Because Rava holds that what? Rava holds that the tumtum can have the status of either sons or daughters. Top of Kuf Mem Aleph. Abaye, my nizon kibas. Rabbi say, according to Abaye, ultimately again, what does it mean? What does it mean ultimately again that the tumtum is supported like a daughter? Because also remember again, in Abaye's interpretation of the Mishnah, when there's a case of nechasim mu'atin, so what happens? Or nechasim merubin for that matter, the sons push the tumtum to the status of a daughter, but ultimately again, the tumtum does not have the right to go ahead and take mizonos. So the Gemara Sulo Tamech, using that same logic, L'Rava my yoresh keben. So according to Rava, what does it mean when we said the tumtum has the ability to yarshin like the son? Ella ro'oi liyoresh ve'ino. Rather, what it means is that technically speaking, although there may be entitlement, ultimately again the tumtum does not get. Hachenami ro'i lizon ve'ino. So to be able to say what it means is that even in the case of the Chasim Reuben, the sons could push the tumtum ultimately again the status of the daughters, but ultimately again he does not get. So Rabbi say we end off over here in the midst of a major machlokes. So first of all, two machlokes. First of all, machlokes and how to interpret the Mishnah. The first case in the Mishnah Rabbi say is where a man leaves behind sons, daughters, and a tumtum. And then what happens? Let's say, I will say, for example, there is nechasim merubin. So the Mishnah said that the sons could push the tumtum to the daughters. So what does that mean? He pushes tumtum to the daughters. So that's machlokas Abaye and Rava. So Abaye says they push him to the status of the daughters, but the tumtum does not have the right to claim any kind of mizonos. Rava says they push him to the daughters, and he has the right to go ahead and what? Take like a daughter. So we'll say that machlokas ultimately opens the door to a more fundamental machlokas, which is what is the status of a tumtum? So we'll say so either possibility is suffix zachar, suffix nekeva, in which case we'll say that's what Rava's saying. Because Rava's ultimately saying that what? That the sons have the ability to say, look, you're not a zachar, you're an nekeva. Therefore, but once you're in a nekeva, then what? You'll take mizonos from the estate. So do we say that a tumtum is a suffix zachar, a suffix nekeva, and therefore the sons have the right to push him ultimately to the status of a nekeva? Or Rav Shimon Gamliel advances a different approach. Shimon Gamliel says no, a tumtum is neither zachar nor nekeva. Rather, again, ultimately a status unto itself. And therefore, again, I will say when we say that the sons have the ability to push him to the daughters, that's fine, but the daughters also have the ability to push him to the son. So to a certain degree, he's in gender no man's land. So because he's in gender no man's land, therefore what? He doesn't have the ability to take from Mazonos or from Yerusha. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's position is espoused not by human beings, but is espoused by animals. It's going to apply in this case of Kabbalah, we apply in the case of human gender kite as well. Shabbos said what ends up coming out is a fundamental machlokas as to the gender categorization of a tumtum. First approach is Tumtum is Safik Zachar, Safik Nekeva. Second approach, where Shimach Lokes is Rav Shimon Gamliel, that Tumtum is a very bifnei atzma, occupies a gender category onto itself, and therefore again really gets kind of like bounced around between the sons and the daughters, ultimately ending up not being able to take neither Yerusha nor Mizonos. And again, I just want to point out, this machlokes is machlokes. This is still meaning this is a fundamental machlokes about the gender categorization of a tumtum. Meretz Hashem will continue tomorrow.
Don't forget the barbecue for the same.
Doesn't stay tumtum forever, right?
Say it again.
Tumtum doesn't stay tumtum forever.
Well, if they end up opening up that membrane, meaning sometimes a tumtum's gender can be discovered.
Right.
And if you discover the
So
gender
we go by birth or we go by after when it's discovered?
when it's discovered, that courageous about whether or not you can back up certain obligations, but we go past when it's discovered.
So could it be the tumtum can